One thing that I didn't mention was, and I haven't updated the church on this, but my sister's husband's brother-in-law, if I'm correct. So my sister's husband's sister's husband. I've already butchered it. But he was in ICU with COVID for a long time, and they'd essentially told them that it was over, and he'd been on forms of life support for quite a while. And they told him that he did not qualify for lung transplants currently, and that he would have to get so many other things in line. And I don't know everything about it, but around the time they're removing these support systems, he became alert and aware, and he started breathing on his own, and he's begun recovery. And so kind of what they thought was unthinkable. So God does do those things. So, but not out of the woods yet, but still amazing. So anyway, this morning, oh man, again, this king-size bed has been a blessing and a curse. I told you the little boys had told us that, it fits 4 people. So they've been really pushing this idea that they're sleeping with us ever since we've got it. We've had at least 4 people in that bed. And man, last night was just brutal. I probably slept 2 hours. And it's every time Job decides that he's alone in his room, so he's got to come in and crawl in bed with us, that it just begins to overflow. And so last night, Claire was like, that's it, everybody out. She had me carry everybody back to their beds. And then, except for Simeon, he wouldn't go. And lately, he's doing this kind of cute thing, but he calls himself Baby Sea Turtle. He's like, Dad, you're Baby Sea Turtle. Dad, you're Baby Sea Turtle. And he snuggles up, and he's really cuddly, and it's cute. But he didn't sleep. Like, I laid there. This was at, I don't know, this must have happened around 1:30 or 2. And I laid there with him till about 3:30. And finally, I was like, man, I cannot sleep with him hugging and cuddling. And I was like, so I went down and laid on the couch. And I was just wide awake. I was awake, and I stayed awake the rest of the day. So I was like, man, I just got a couple hours of sleep, but I don't know. The bed is good, but it's bad. It's been rough. Anyway, that has nothing to do with anything besides I'm a little sleepy this morning. But anyway, this morning we're looking at laying up treasure in heaven and not laying up treasure on earth. And if you have your Bibles, we're going to be looking at Matthew 6:19 is where we're going to be starting. And it says, do not lay up for yourself treasure on earth where moth and rust corrupt and where thieves break in and steal. And when we lived in town, we lived in Rochester, Minnesota beginning off, and we didn't really get the full effect of this moth and rust corrupt and thieves break in and steal. Really this rust idea in the Bible, and this isn't in my notes. I should never go off my notes because I go over. But this idea of rust in the Bible, it's not actually rust. There's no word to the English language of what this is. The word is just collapse into deterioration, like just let nature take its course, and it's just destruction of what you own happens. And when we moved from town, as soon as we moved out to the farm, this became a reality, and I gotta know a lot of you guys understand this. Because it was like, man, we got out there, and you get real familiar real fast with what nature does. It's like nonstop. It's like, man, the coons are getting in, and they're killing the chickens, and the neighbor's dog's coming up, and he's killing the turkeys, chickens, and ducks, and then we had some weasel that would sneak in the tiniest wire and kill all of our rabbits in their cages, and the weeds would just come raging up, and you think, how can I even keep up with this? And the gate is always broken, and the fence is always down, and the pigs are always out in the flower bed, and it's like there's always water damage happening somewhere, and there's always something that's just like the bottom edge of the shed is starting to rot out, and it's like, why is it just like, it's just like storm hits and it just breaks things, and it's just like, why is it like we're being eaten alive out here? It's just like you realize that there's a full-time job just trying to keep up with nature. You're like, wow, this is what farmers must feel like. It's like insanity. It's full time. It's like it's out to get you, and everything you own is just crumbling underneath you. And it's when we're thinking about laying up treasure on earth, I think this is kind of the concept of that whole destruction happens to your stuff. It just happens. It just like we've thought many times about buying a camper, but what is the problem? When it's parked there, the mice get in and they're eating it up, and the water damage gets in, and the humidity gets in, and it starts to mold, and it starts to rot, and pretty soon you're just like I'm just feeling sick because my possession is wrecking right in front of my eyes, and it's just I can't justify it. I can't do it. I can't, everything I buy is just getting eaten by nature. It's just nature devours it. And so this is the concept, that don't lay up your treasure here, because this is a fact, people. This is what happens to it. This is the reality of what goes on. And then Jesus says in verse 20, but lay up for yourself treasure in heaven, where neither moth nor rust corrupt, nor do thieves break in and steal. He says, that sounds real good, right on the onside of things. You're like, man, a place where I can put all my stuff and nothing gets to it. No deterioration happens. Nothing swallows it up. It's just safe and it's good. And I got to guess that God's interest system pays pretty good if you were to invest in his bank. That it's just so much safer and better. It's just vastly different. So I want to ask this question when he says this, do not lay up treasure on earth. How are we supposed to take that? Is that like, don't buy something on earth? Or is it more of a warning? And today we're going to look at kind of two sides of it, because today we're going to look at it maybe a little bit lightweight, and next week we're going to look at the danger side of it. But if we were to look at it as this way, there's this way of looking at it. Let's say my son Job, the poor Job, who always is the one who overflows the bed and everybody's got to go back. But let's say my son Job, he works for 10 or 12 years. And he works, and all of his free time he works, and he works, and he works, and he works, and I'm proud of him. And he says, Dad, I've saved up $25,000. And I'm like, son, that is a great start in life. You're on a roll, buddy. And he says, Dad, I'm going to take out a loan for another $25,000. I'm going to buy the truck I want. And all of a sudden I feel sick to my stomach. I'm like, wait a minute. You killed yourself years of your life to get to this point, and you're going to enslave yourself to another $25,000? And it's going to tank. It's going to the depreciation and the dents and the rust and the deer and the insurance payments and everything. Buddy, it's going to eat you alive. And I would tell him, don't do it. Don't buy a treasure like that. Don't, because I'm your dad and I care. And that's the dumbest thing I could think of doing with that, because that is not where you're at in life, buddy. And I think, this is kind of what God is saying. He's saying, don't. How long, kids, did you work for this? What did you invest to get this? How much of your life did you pour in to get this? And what are you going to buy? You're going to invest in the world? You're going to invest in that? It's going to eat you alive. It's going to be sucked up by the elements. It's going to be ruined. It's going to be lost. And it's like, don't, not necessarily. I hesitate to never say that Jesus, when he says don't, doesn't mean don't. But there is an idea that you could say he's saying don't be dumb. But it's not a sin to buy something, but he's saying don't be dumb. That's one way of looking at it. And then we're going to look at, I believe that's probably the context here, is don't be dumb. Don't be dumb. It's going to get wrecked. It's going to depreciate. It's going to get eaten up, and it's all going to be gone. And I believe that in the context of this is don't be dumb. And next week we're going to look at it could actually become your God, so to speak, whereas far more dangerous where it becomes this no could mean no. And so as we look at this, I want you to ask the question, and I want you to just think in your mind, are you wealthy? Are you rich? And I want you to think of this, I want you to know this first off. I'm not out here asking for money for this church. I'm not. I trust God's going to provide for us, and people who are dedicated to this church are going to do what God leads them to do. And I hate money-hungry churches who preach a message on money just because they want the money. You lose so many people who are so important because they see the greed of the church. That's not where I'm going at all, okay? I don't want the money. I don't want it for me. I don't want it for the church. What I want is any money that comes into this church that we're like, yes, let's express it to outward, to reach our arms and hands and feet out, to do things that matter for this world. Like I'm not Like, don't get me wrong, I hate preaching on money, I really do. I always list these things. It maybe comes in at number 12. It's not way up there on that list, but I don't like preaching on money because of that. I'm not out to get this, but I want you to ask yourself, okay, as far as your giving, are you wealthy and are you rich? And this, once again, I love to preach verse by verse of the Bible and be like, look at guys, the Bible says this and Jesus says this and the meaning is this based on the context and this is exactly what I'm teaching and I hate branching off into my opinion. And this is something that I just think it's going to open our minds up a little bit. I just want you to consider this, are you rich, for a minute, okay? And once again, it's not really how I like to teach, but and these are some numbers that I Googled, okay? And maybe they're skewed, maybe they're wrong, I don't know, but I think they're going to cause you to think, okay? These are just some Gallup polls, and these are essentially the first numbers that popped up when I Googled wealth rates and things like this. So this is what I Googled it, and it's the worldwide average income, worldwide. And it says the average income worldwide is $9,733 US per year. That's the worldwide average. But it says that there's many people who are multi-billionaires who own huge majorities of that, okay? So they say that that there's not a lot of people who make a lot of money worldwide. And so they said that in America, this is in the United States, so remember this, in the United States, the average male and female combined amount that each person makes is $31,100 per year. So where does that put you in the worldwide spectrum? According to Google, okay? I'm just saying, this isn't Bible, I'm just saying, according to Google, if you make the average of $31,100 a year, you are in the top 4% worldwide income bracket. And at that income bracket, you are in a minuscule amount throughout history of the wealthiest people to ever walk the earth. Grossly in the fraction number of most wealthy people who've ever lived on the face of the earth, making $31,000 per year. You're in a sliver minority. If you're in 100 people today on earth, you're in the top 4. You know, very, very wealthy. So as we think about that, I want to ask this. So this is kind of funny. How do we look at money in the world? I looked at what is the poverty level, okay? And I just looked up myself. You type it in, I got 4 kids and a wife, okay? And it says if you're making the average $31,000 per year with my family, you're over $5,000 below the poverty level. You're living in depths of poverty. And I was like, wow, like that's crazy, you know? And I thought, this is poverty. But then, okay, step back. We're living in America, right? We're in that, a lot of us, the majority of us in that top 4%. So I looked up worldwide, okay? And I looked up worldwide and it said, what is the worldwide poverty line? Because they put out these lines, these poverty lines. And this is one I listed for me is the 2021 just released poverty line in the United States. So I looked this up and I looked up worldwide poverty line and it doesn't even give you $1 a year income. It says the worldwide poverty level is $1.90 a day. If you make $1.91 a day at work, you're above the poverty level. That's worldwide. That's much different than the United States, isn't it? So then I'm asking myself, is it possible that we're a little bit out of touch? Is it possible that we really don't have a clue what really wealth is? Is it possible that we don't realize how much treasure we spend on us? Is it possible that we're worried about things like, how am I going to put this addition on that the government says I have to have a car with under 60,000 miles and at least 6 bedrooms or I'm impoverished? And I almost wonder if the rest of the world is saying, cry me a river, Are we? I just ask myself, do we know? Are we in touch? Do we understand where we're at in our wealth? When God looks down on the world, who does he say, these are the extreme wealthy? And I want you to ask yourself that, if you're making that $31,000 a year, is he looking at you as the extreme wealthy? And have you extended yourself to where the government says you're impoverished to meet the government standard instead of the worldwide standard, but beyond worldwide, God's standard? Are you laying up treasure on earth or not in God's standard? Are you worried about that addition or are you worried about just like paying medical bills just in general without insurance, like getting the life, living in your apartment, like that sort of difference. I don't know. I just want you to think about that, because I think I think it opens our eyes to maybe who we are, because I think maybe, I don't want to offend people, but I really feel like maybe even I myself just am completely out of touch with what God is actually saying here as far as not laying up treasure on earth. I think the U.S. tells us that we're not laying up treasure when we maybe are. So Jesus says, don't waste your treasure on earthly things, okay? And I feel it's kind of in a don't be stupid sense. But listen as he goes on in verse 21. He says, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And I think that this is saying something that's kind of cutting, a little bit sharp stab, okay? Because I believe he's saying this. I see where you care about. I see where your heart is. I see what you're doing with that money. I know who you love. I know what you care about. I'm looking, and I know. He says, where your treasure is, there will be your heart be also. And I think this goes forwards and backwards. I think this is a future thing, and I think this is a past and present thing. Because to say, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. I think it's, when you see someone spend their money on something, you're like, yep, that's what they care about. I see it. But then it goes beyond that. It goes to Jesus says, where your treasure is, there will your heart end up. So he's saying, if you buy and build the house you want with your treasure on earth piled up the way you've wanted it, you will fall in love with it. And that will be what you love. That is going to be the result. And I wonder, is there anyone kind of, I do this, okay? So this is why I ask if you do this. I sit here and I kind of argue with myself, or argue with reason. I say, can Jesus really say that? Can I pursue earthly things and yet love his people and God? And can I pursue these things and build these things, but yet defy this sort of reason and say, I still have my goal in heaven that I'm looking towards. My goal is up there and it's not down here, and my love is for the people, not for what I spent my money on. Can I do that? Is it possible? Can I do that? And I'm kind of arguing myself, asking myself if this is possible, okay? But listen to what Jesus says as he continues to lay it on us here, as he continues to lay this down. He says in verse 22, he says, the eye is the lamp of the body. And he says, so if the eye is good, the whole body will be filled with light. And we're like, huh? At least the first time I heard this, I was like, huh? The eye is the lamp of the body, and if it's good, the whole body will be filled with light? Because we don't use the eye, the health of the eye, we don't use that, at least in Illinois, as an expression, okay? But in the Old Testament, and I'm sorry I didn't get these verses all into the bulletin, but in the Old Testament, the health of your eye had to do with how you looked with compassion on other people. How healthy is your eyeball? How much love do you have for the poor? And they related it to the health of the eyeball. In Deuteronomy 15:9, it says, do not let your eye look begrudgingly against the poor people. Don't let your eye become glazed over with this grudging feeling to people who have not money. And in Proverbs 22:9, it says this. It says, the one who has a bountiful eye will give bread to the poor people. The one whose eye is healthy and it looks with compassion on those in need is going to take their possessions and they're going to be like, here, I'm going to share them with you and I'm going to give it to the poor because my eye is healthy. Because my eye is healthy, I'm going to give this to you and it will be yours. And in Proverbs 23:6, it says, do not eat the bread of the man who has an evil eye. It says if someone, let's say you're the needy person, and you look at this person who's given this bread to you and they're kind of just, their eyes are glazed over with begrudging hatred. Here, take your bread, He says, if you're looking at it and they don't have an eye of compassion and an eye of care and an eye of love, that their eyes are not healthy when they're looking at you and they don't really love you, they don't really care, and they're just kind of giving it to you and he says, don't even take that bread from them. They don't care. Their eyes are not healthy. So now understanding, and this is throughout the whole Old Testament, so now understanding what he means by a healthy eye. Listen to what he says. He says, the eye is the lamp of the body.
And if the eye is healthy, the whole body will be filled with light. So he says, if your eye is healthy, that is looking with compassion outward to all the people in need and poor, it says your whole body will be filled with light. So if you look around and you say, what fills my body with light? I'm looking around and I'm seeing it, I'm taking this all in. Now shut your eyes and you're like, wow, it just got black. Like if you're got a healthy eye, there is much life flowing into your body. And I know this is a difficult passage. I'm going to try and finish this out here. But listen to what he says in verse 23. He says, but if your eye is bad, then your whole body will be filled with darkness. And he says, if the light in you is darkness, how dark is your life? And he says, if you don't have a healthy eye, if you're filled and glossed over with greed for taking the world's possessions and making them mine, and you don't have that health in your eyes that looks with love and compassion to the people that could be in need, and you're going to give the bread to them instead of keeping it to yourself, he says, if the love in your eye is not there, your whole body is black, dark. Like if the compassion in your eyes isn't even there, then there's nothing down in there. And this speaks strongly against the argument of I can keep it for myself and make the majority of everything I spend on me and still love them and still love God and still lay up my treasure in heaven. It's pointing in a bad direction already. It's going in a bad direction. But that being said, listen to how Jesus closes this out and listen to how he ends this off, okay? He says this in verse 24. He says, no one can serve two masters. He will either love the one and hate the other, or he will be devoted to one and neglect the other. No one can serve both God and money. Jesus says no one is going to be able to do it. No one can love their money and love their God. He says either you're going to be glazed over your eyeballs with a greed to put it in your account, in your home, in your stuff, and you're going to love it. You're going to fall in love with it. Or you're going to lay it up in that heavenly treasure. And you're going to think to yourself, the day I walk into heaven's door, it's going to be there and it's going to be great. And I can't wait to the day I walk in the door because that's where I put my stuff. He says, if that's how it's going to be, you're going to love it because that's where it is. But he says, if you put it right here, you're going to be like, oh, if I die, that's gone. I chose. I made my choice. I love it here or I love it there. Either my eyes were glazed over without that health of the eye that looks to the man in need of bread, and I didn't give it out, or I kept it for myself. You know what I'm saying? You can't. He says, Jesus says, like, if you're sitting there having this internal argument that I can, he kind of ends with this. You can't. Like, you can't. It doesn't get like, I don't know how else he can say it. He says, you turn to yourself and putting it in your pot. You turned your back on that healthy eyes that sees the poor. You turned your back on those who could have benefited from your extreme wealth that you have, or your small amount of wealth. Even the widow who gave not of her abundance, not of her excess, but she gave of her necessity. She gave what she needed to eat with to God. Like, not everyone gives of abundance. Some people give of what it cost them that they needed to live on, so now they're going to go without. Some people have a heart to give that's beyond, but we need to ask ourselves, where do we stand in this picture? And what has maybe society told us is treasure on earth, and what has society told us is poor, and maybe we just totally missed the boat on that one. And so anyway, in closing this morning, I don't know, but I got to think maybe there's people out there thinking what I'm thinking, and that is that I maybe take this way too lightly. You know, maybe I don't take this nearly serious enough. Maybe I got to think a little bit harder maybe a lot of it harder about this, you know. And I hope that we're not fighting against Jesus' warning and not maybe trying to see things through his view and what we actually are laying up. That maybe we think, oh, we only have enough to lay up, just enough for us, and maybe we just don't realize that 6 bedrooms is not necessity. And just asking yourself this, where are you putting that treasure? And then ask yourself, why didn't you put it in God's bank? Why didn't you put your treasure where your heart was going to follow and flow? Why didn't you do that? Why why is it more important to be here with you? And it's a very important thing that I just want you to ask yourself. And then I just want to end with this, and that is that, man, I felt this for a long time, that I've just felt this burden to do more. I've kind of lived this burden of wanting to do more, and I get kind of depressed with feeling like I'm not ready for my message, and my message has to be good, and it kind of eats me up, and my stomach hurts, and I lack the outreach that I want to have to get to those neighbors who have that tarp on their roof, to reach out to make that goal, and I don't get where my heart desires that I would be sharing more of my money and sharing more of my time and reaching out more to others. I don't achieve it. And if you're feeling that too, I want you to talk to me, and it helps to have help. It helps to work together. It helps to be like, hey, let's do this. Let's make a plan. Let's do something for someone, and let's do something, because it's hard to do it on your own. It really is. But just come and encourage me, and let's work together, and let's do more. Let's do more. Let's be more what we ought to be. So anyway, let's go ahead and close in a word of prayer this morning.